Florida heat has its own kind of weight, like breathing through warm syrup. Out here on the edge of Lakewood Pines, where cicadas scream and the air smells like wet pine needles, peace feels almost unnatural. I came here to forget what I used to be. My name's Elias Cade, 23, retired Special Forces. Yeah, retired sounds ridiculous at my age, but that's what happens when you see too much too early. I was one of the best, they told me. Missions no one talked about. Operations that didn't exist. Then one day I just walked away. Now I live in a half-finished cabin outside town. No uniform, no orders, just heat, silence, and the sound of my boots crunching over gravel when I walk to the diner every morning. Lakewood Pines is small, about 10,000 people, and everyone here knows everyone. The kind of place where the waitress calls you Han, even if you look like you've been through hell. They smile easy here. They laugh loud. It's peaceful, I guess. I grew my hair long after I left the unit, black down to my shoulders. People sometimes glance at my eyes, yellow, almost golden in sunlight, but they never ask. Maybe they think it's contacts. Maybe they just don't want to know. I was sitting at the diner when the first emergency alert buzzed across every phone in the place. Emergency alert, CDC notice, pathogen outbreak detected in northern regions. Avoid unnecessary travel to Alaska and surrounding areas. Nobody cared. Someone joked about it being another flu. Laughter filled the room, and the waitress turned up the radio, drowning out the tension. The song was old, something about summer and freedom. For the first time in years, I smiled. After breakfast, I went fishing near the edge of the lake. The air shimmered, and the reflection of the trees danced over the water. I felt something I hadn't felt since the military. Calm. Maybe I could stay here. Maybe I could build something. That night, the whole town gathered for a fair down at the park. Lights strung across the trees, the smell of grilled corn and barbecue filling the air. Kids ran past me with glowing sticks, and couples laughed near the food stands. Someone was singing on stage, voice cracking but full of life. It was almost perfect, but then the wind shifted. The air grew heavier, carrying a faint metallic tang. I felt my instincts tighten. Old habits never die. I looked up at the horizon. There was a reddish hue to the clouds, faint, almost like sunset, but wrong somehow. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. Emergency alert. National broadcast. Unidentified pathogen clusters confirmed in the northern U.S. maintain calm. Further instructions pending. The crowd barely noticed. Music still played. Laughter echoed. But I felt the shift in the air. The kind of tension I knew all too well. The pause before something catastrophic. I slipped my phone into my pocket and scanned the crowd. Old instincts ran hot in my blood, and my pulse synced to a rhythm I hadn't heard in years. Something was coming, and whatever it wasn't staying in Alaska. The night after the fair, I couldn't sleep. The crickets were loud, the air was thick, and that faint red haze on the horizon hadn't gone away. It looked almost alive now, shifting with the clouds, pulsing faintly when lightning flashed in the distance. I sat on the porch of my cabin with a cold beer, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just heat lightning, just smoke from fires up north, just whatever excuse would keep me from slipping back into soldier mode. Then my phone vibrated. No caller ID, just a string of numbers. 0-0-4, Black, Delta. For a second, I froze. That wasn't a call. That was a military code. A code we only used when operations went dark, completely severed from public channels, beyond recovery or containment. The kind of code you never expected to see again once you left the service. The message came next. Cade, if you're reading this, it's already begun. CDC lockdowns are failing. Pathogen confirmed airborne, mutagenic properties. Florida next. Prepare for Code Black protocol. No contact outside secured perimeter. My stomach turned cold. I checked the sender trace. It looped through 3 encrypted nodes, all military. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. And they weren't joking. Outside, the wind picked up. I could hear the trees creaking, leaves rustling in unnatural rhythm, like something was moving through them. Another alert hit the phones across town, the siren echoing even from my porch. Emergency alert. United States government. Nationwide containment protocols in effect. Avoid exposure to red atmospheric anomalies. Do not evacuate. Do not approach airborne contamination. Red atmospheric anomalies. So they knew about the haze. I grabbed my duffel bag from under the bed, still packed like some part of me never really stopped being military. Inside, a suppressed handgun, survival gear, comm radio, and a small black case stamped Prototype K9. I never turned it in. They never asked. When I turned the radio on, static filled the air. For a second, just noise. Then voices. Choppy, frantic. Alaska gone dark. Containment failed. Miami breach confirmed. They're not. The line cut. Then another voice. Deep, calm, familiar. Cade, if you're out there, get underground. They're calling it the Red Veil. The spreading through humidity. You're our only one left near the epicenter. It was Mason, my old unit commander. He'd vanished 2 years ago after that Black Ops mission overseas, the one that got buried under national security. Mason, I said quietly, gripping the radio. What the hell's going on? It's not a virus, he said. It's a weapon, and Florida's about to be the test site. The signal cut off before I could reply. I looked toward town. The lights were flickering, power unstable. A faint, unnatural hum rolled through the night, low and deep, like machinery beneath the earth. The red haze was thicker now, creeping over the lake like liquid smoke. My instincts screamed one thing. It's already here. By sunrise, Lakewood Pines was wrong. The morning heat should have been heavy and golden, the way it always was after a night storm. Instead, the sky looked bruised, red bleeding into orange, like dawn had been poisoned. The air carried a low hum, barely audible but deep enough to make your teeth ache. I drove into town with my truck windows sealed tight, mask on, and the radio tuned to static. The streets were quiet, too quiet. The diner's neon sign still flickered, but the glass door hung half open. A single shoe lay in the parking lot. No people, no laughter, just a trail of footprints leading inside. I stepped in, gun low, breathing slow. The smell hit first. Iron, sweat, and something sweet, like syrup. Tables were overturned, plates smashed. Behind the counter, a coffee pot was still on, boiling itself dry. And then I heard it, a whisper, not loud, not clear, just faint voices, layered on top of one another, echoing from the walls. Elias, my name. I spun around. The air rippled faintly where the sunlight hit the window, like heat distortion. Something in the haze was moving, bending the light just enough to distort shapes. I aimed my gun. Nothing. The distortion faded. Outside, another emergency alert went off. Every phone, every TV, every speaker around town screamed at once. Emergency alert. Florida Division of Public Safety. Stay inside. Do not breathe unfiltered air. Avoid contact with any person displaying retinal discoloration or erratic mimicry. Mimicry. I felt my throat tighten. The government wasn't just calling it a pathogen anymore. It was something that could copy. I radioed Mason. Lakewood's compromised. No visual on infected yet, but I've got auditory distortion and the radio hissed. Static. Then they adapt fast. If you're hearing your name, it's already noticed you. Don't engage it, Elias. Don't let it see you breathe. Mason? Mason. The radio went dead. I backed toward the door when a figure appeared across the street. Mrs. Calloway, the librarian. She was standing perfectly still in the middle of the road, eyes pale white, head tilted slightly too far to the side. Her lips moved, but the sound came a second after she spoke, like her voice was lagging behind reality. Elias, she whispered, but this time, the voice came from behind me. I turned. No one. The air shimmered again, and the red haze crept closer, crawling down the street like a living thing. I ran back to my truck, slammed the door, and started the engine. The dashboard flickered, electrical interference. The GPS glitched, red static filling the map, and one word blinked over and over. Stay. That's when I realized something. The alert wasn't warning us anymore. It was guiding us. And whatever was behind the fog had already taken control of the system. By noon, the sun was nothing more than a pale red circle behind the haze. The whole sky looked wrong, like a storm was trapped just above the clouds. I'd driven back to my cabin, heart still pounding from what I'd seen in town. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, but Mason's last words replayed in my head. Don't breathe it. Don't let it see you. I locked the doors, sealed the vents, and turned on the shortwave radio. I needed orders, or at least something human. That's when the next alert hit. Every phone, radio, and TV in the area blared at once. My truck alarm went off, my watch vibrated, and a voice, cold, robotic, but human enough, filled the room. Warning, emergency alert. Airborne contamination confirmed. Warning. The red veil pathogen is now fully airborne. All citizens are to remain outside to receive decontamination. Do not shelter indoors. Fresh air will neutralize infection. I froze. That didn't make sense. The last alert said not to go outside. And I knew the voice. It sounded close, like whoever was broadcasting it wasn't far. I switched to a different frequency, heart pounding. The same message played again, but underneath it, if you listened closely, something was whispering. Words buried in static. Too fast to understand, but it felt like language. I killed the radio. That wasn't the government. That was something pretending to be the government. I grabbed my emergency packs, ration bars, bottled water, first aid, and started filling a duffel. My training kicked in. 3 days of food, 5 gallons of water, mask filters, knife, ammo, the essentials. Outside, something was happening. Through the window, I saw movement. People stepping out of their homes, drawn by the broadcast. Some still in their pajamas, others barefoot. They all looked up at the sky, motionless. Then the twitching began. First the fingers, then their necks, like muscles were misfiring. One man started clawing at his own skin, like something underneath was burning him alive. Another woman's jaw started clicking, over and over, faster and faster, until it snapped sideways. And then they looked up. The red haze above the town pulsed once, as if it noticed. The crowd started convulsing, not just twitching, changing. Veins bulged black beneath their skin, eyes leaking crimson tears. Their mouths opened, but no screams came out. Just a wet, gargling sound, like air bubbling through blood. One by one, they fell to their knees, facing the sky. And then they all smiled. I took a step back from the window. The air outside was vibrating now. That same low hum I'd heard before, but stronger, alive. And then, faintly, a new voice crackled through the radio again. Not robotic this time. A whisper. It's beautiful, Elias. Come see what we've become. I dropped the radio. The voice wasn't Mason's. It wasn't human, but it knew my name, and it was right outside my door. The radio went silent after that. No more voices, no more alerts, just the sound of wind scraping through the trees and the faint crackle of static somewhere deep in the fog. I stayed low inside the cabin, breathing through my mask, watching the shapes outside. They weren't moving anymore, not like before. The ones who'd gone still after the airborne broadcast were now twitching differently. Slow, broken movements, like marionettes with tangled strings. The red hue of the sky had dimmed to something darker, but the air shimmered around them, almost like heat distortion. Then I saw one stand back up. His eyes weren't white anymore. They were pitch black, veins spreading like cracks through his skin. Blood had dried across his mouth, and when he opened it again, his jaw unhinged with a dry pop. He wasn't breathing. None of them were. It wasn't airborne. It was contact-based, a virus. The airborne alert had been bait to make people go outside, touch the air, touch each other. The screams started about a minute later. From down the hill, near the gas station, I saw flashes, someone firing a handgun. A man was trying to run, shouting for help, but 3 of them tackled him, dragging him into the street. The sound that followed didn't even sound human. Bones cracking, wet tearing, the gurgle of blood hitting pavement. I turned off my lights and grabbed my rifle. Every part of me wanted to move, but training said wait, observe, assess, survive. The infected were moving faster now, jerky but coordinated. Not mindless hunting. They avoided bright light, but the red glow from the sky made everything dim enough to keep them active. Then I heard the trucks. 2 military vehicles rolled into town, headlights cutting through the haze. Men in biosuits stepped out, rifles raised. One shouted orders, something about containment perimeter and Phase 2 clearance. Phase 2, that was a kill order. I knew that tone. They weren't here to save anyone. The lead soldier turned his flashlight on one of the infected. The creature hissed, and its skin began splitting down the chest as if something underneath was trying to crawl out. The soldier fired. The bullet barely slowed it down. Within seconds, the team was overrun. Shrieks, gunfire, blood spraying against the truck doors. One of the soldiers broke away, running toward the forest, yelling for backup through his comms. I saw his mask get torn off mid-scream. I backed away from the window. The sound of their feeding, wet, desperate, filled the air. Then silence again. I checked the last message Mason sent. It was just one line. If it's not airborne, then it's already in their blood. That meant it was only a matter of time before everyone in Lakewood Pines turned. And if Mason was right, this wasn't an outbreak. It was an experiment. The sun never really rose that morning, just a dull red glow that made the world look half dead. Smoke drifted in from the highway, thick enough to blur the trees. The air smelled like burning plastic and blood. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin anymore, not with the sounds outside getting closer. Shuffling feet, dragging limbs, the wet slap of something crawling on the gravel road. If the military was here for containment, that meant one thing. They'd burn the town before letting it spread. I packed light, just ammo, rations, and my rifle, and slipped through the back door. Every sound felt too loud. The crunch of leaves under my boots echoed in my chest. As I reached the ridge overlooking town, I saw it. Rows of military trucks forming a perimeter around Lakewood Pines. Soldiers in hazmat suits were setting up floodlights and quarantine tents. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the crimson fog like blades. They were trying to contain it. I exhaled slowly. Maybe there was still a chance to get out. But then I heard the radio chatter, soft but clear through my earpiece. Command, Zone 4 is a total loss. Civilians showing severe mutation. Authorizing purge. Repeat, purge authorization confirmed. Purge. They weren't trying to save anyone. Down by the gas station, I saw them piling bodies, some still moving. The soldiers didn't flinch as they doused them in accelerant. The fire roared, thick black smoke rising into the blood-red sky. I turned away, my stomach twisted. They were treating everyone as infected. A sudden voice made me freeze. Hands where I can see them. I spun around, 3 soldiers, rifles raised. The leader's visor reflected my face back at me. I'm not infected, I said, lowering my weapon slowly. I got a code black message. Mason gave the order. You know who I am. The soldier hesitated. Name, Elias Cade, Special Forces, Ghost Division. He looked back at the others. One nodded. The leader spoke again, quieter this time. Cade, Ghost Division's off record. No active files. If you got a code black, it means you're classified priority intel. Then get me out of here, I said. You don't have time to. A scream cut through the air. Behind them, one of their men dropped to his knees, convulsing. Blood spilled from his mask filters. His body twisted in ways bones shouldn't move. The leader shouted, "Contain him!" But it was too late. The soldier's spine cracked, his limbs jerking violently as he tore through his own suit. Flesh split, tendons snapped. He stood again, but not as human. They opened fire. I hit the dirt as bullets ripped through the trees. The creature moved faster than I'd seen before, snapping helmets, tearing through Kevlar like tissue. One soldier screamed as it bit into his neck, pulling him down with a spray of blood that hit the grass in dark streaks. The leader fired 3 shots into its head before it finally stopped moving. When the gunfire ended, only 2 of us were left breathing. He looked at me, shaking. "We're sealing the roads. No one's getting out. Orders from command." "Then I'll find another way." He hesitated. "You don't understand, Cade. They're not trying to contain it." He looked toward the horizon where smoke rose from the highway. "They're using this place to see how far it spreads before we burn." I stared at him. "So we're just the test." He didn't answer. The distant roar of engines filled the air, flamethrower carriers moving in. The purge was starting. I turned toward the forest. "Then I'm getting out before they light the match." Behind me, the soldier stayed silent. When I glanced back one last time, he was gone. Just a trail of blood leading into the red fog. The forest burned behind me, not all at once. More like slow waves of fire rolling through the trees, the sound of dry pine crackling under the heat. The air was so thick with smoke that breathing through the mask felt like drowning. The military had started the purge. Flamethrowers swept through Lakewood pines, turning homes and streets into molten ash. The red haze mixed with the smoke, spreading the glow higher into the sky until it looked like hell had opened above Florida. I moved fast, low, silent, keeping to the shadows. My goal was the northern highway, maybe 20 miles out. If I could reach the abandoned freight tunnels near the swamp line, I might make it past the containment perimeter before they sealed it off completely. Gunfire echoed behind me, short bursts, desperate screams. The soldiers were losing control. When I reached the edge of the ridge, I saw it all. The town was a burning grid of light, streets lined with fire, vehicles overturned, people running in every direction. The infected weren't mindless anymore, they were organized. Packs of them dragged soldiers down into the smoke, their movements sharp and predatory. Some of them were still transforming. Bodies bent backward, jaws split, ribs cracked open like wings. It was fast, painful, but once it finished, they stopped screaming. They just stared, eyes black as oil. The military didn't stand a chance. Radio static. Command to Delta 3. Backup compromised. Fire units down. Quarantine breach at East Gate. Repeat. Breach. The transmission cut off with a wet, tearing sound. I tightened my grip on the rifle and started moving again. Every step crunched glass and burned leaves. I passed a fallen convoy, bodies half melted, armor still smoking. One of the soldiers was barely alive, whispering through cracked lips. "Don't let them touch you," he rasped. "It's not infection, it's rewriting." His eyes rolled back before he could finish. A shadow moved behind the truck. Fast. I ducked, raised my gun. A soldier stumbled out, mask shattered, chest plate torn open. Blood soaked through his uniform, but he was still moving. I aimed center mass. "Stop!" I barked. He did, but then he smiled. The skin around his mouth split wider than it should have. His teeth were wrong, jagged, uneven. He stepped closer, his voice rasping like broken glass. "Elias!" I fired, once in the head. He dropped instantly. I didn't wait to see if he got up again. By the time I reached the outskirts, night had fallen, but the horizon still glowed red. Helicopters were still circling overhead, but they weren't rescuing anyone. They were incinerating. Napalm fireballs lit up the far end of town. The government was wiping the whole place clean. When I finally hit the swamp road, I thought I was clear. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of engines. I allowed myself to breathe just once. Then, from behind me, I heard the sound of something dragging metal. Slow, scraping, like armor being pulled through the mud. I turned my light toward the sound. A soldier, half burned, half rotted, was crawling through the swamp water, his limbs jerking in unnatural rhythm. The left side of his helmet had fused into his face, flesh melted around it. He looked at me with one remaining eye, And then I realized the military wasn't losing the fight. They were joining the infected. It wasn't just civilians anymore. Whatever this virus was, it didn't care what side you were on. The sky turned red before dawn. It wasn't sunrise. It was fallout light, bleeding through the smoke clouds that covered Florida's upper line. The smell of burning oil and rot clung to the air like wet cloth. Every breath stung my throat. I had made it to the edge of town, near what used to be an old NOAA weather station, half buried in vines and forgotten marsh. Inside, the bunker still had power. Barely. I slammed the steel hatch shut behind me and twisted the wheel until it locked. Then I sat in the dark, listening. Nothing but the soft hum of the generators. For the first time in days, it was quiet. No screaming, no gunfire, no flesh tearing against armor. Just silence. I took off my mask. My face was soaked with sweat and ash, my hair plastered to my neck. The mirror on the far wall caught my reflection. Black streaks under my yellow eyes. I barely recognized myself anymore. Then the radio crackled to life. Emergency alert system. Priority 1 transmission. This is Command Center Echo reporting from Tallahassee Containment Zone. If you are hearing this, Florida has been declared compromised. Full-scale evacuation is not possible. The pathogen identified as strain 0B has reached bioevolutionary stages. Human DNA is no longer stable. We have authorization to proceed with clean sweep protocol. Estimated detonation time, 0400 hours. I froze. 0400. That was less than an hour away. The voice continued, cracking with static. All remaining units are advised to find shelter below 40 feet underground. Surface exposure is unsustainable. Repeat, Florida is to be neutralized. Neutralized, that's what they called it. I looked over at the map on the wall, the glowing digital overlay of containment zones. The infection markers weren't stopping at Florida anymore. They were spreading north, into Georgia, Alabama, one red dot pulsing in Louisiana. It wasn't containment, it was collapse. I tore the panel off the comm console and started rewiring the shortwave unit. If there were any of my old units still alive, anyone from the Ghost Corps, they'd know what clean sweep meant. It wasn't just nukes, it was atmospheric burn. They were going to erase everything. The radio clicked again, different channel scrambled. A voice came through, rough and quiet. Elias, you're still alive, aren't you? I froze mid-motion. I knew that voice. Captain Rourke, my former CO. They told me you made it out. Don't try to run, son. It's already in the air. I grabbed the mic. You're lying. It's not airborne. It wasn't. Not until the second mutation. They tried to burn it out and it adapted. Whatever it is, it's feeding off radiation. My stomach turned cold. The nukes weren't going to end it, they were going to feed it. You've got one shot, Elias, Rourke said. Get underground, deep as you can. And don't come back up. The signal cut out. Outside, the wind began to howl. The swamp trembled with the sound of distant thunder, except it wasn't thunder. It was the first detonation. The bunker lights flickered as the shockwave rolled through the ground. The air pressure shifted, and dust rained from the ceiling. I sealed the last hatch, powered down the systems, and sat beside the steel door, clutching my rifle even though I knew it wouldn't matter. Above me, the world was ending. But somewhere in the static of the dead radio, I still heard faint whispers. The infected weren't dead. They were calling low, rhythmic, inhuman voices through the radio bands, like they had learned how to speak again. And they were saying my name. I don't know how long I was out. The last thing I remember was the heat, the kind that melts concrete and burns the oxygen right out of your lungs. The bunker shook for what felt like hours before everything went black. When I woke up, the lights were dead. The air was stale and heavy, filled with dust and the metallic tang of dried blood. My ears rang, my throat dry as sandpaper. I reached for my watch. The screen was cracked, frozen on 5:47. The nukes had gone off hours ago, but I was still breathing. I turned on the flashlight attached to my rifle and stepped toward the bunker door. The metal was warped, glowing faintly red. Outside, Something was moving, slow, with scraping sounds, like flesh against steel. I leaned in closer, careful not to make a sound. Then I heard it. Ilias, the voice slithered through the seams of the door. Not from the radio, not from a speaker. It was right outside. I took a step back, heart pounding, and aimed the rifle at the hatch. The thing whispered again. You survived the fire, so did we. The scraping stopped. Then silence. I held my breath. My pulse thudded in my ears. After a few long minutes, I forced the wheel lock and cracked the door open, just an inch enough to see the outside. The world was red. Sky, ground, everything. The trees were black silhouettes dripping with ash. The swamp water had turned thick and rust-colored, bubbling faintly. Bodies, no shapes, moved in the mist, twitching in bursts, their skin glowing faintly under the radiation. Some looked human, others didn't. I stepped outside. The Geiger counter on my chest screamed to life, but it didn't matter. I had to see. The town was gone. The buildings had collapsed into molten piles of concrete and steel. A few cars remained, their windows melted into black glass. And there, right where the main square used to be, stood a figure. Tall, still, its body charred, but its eyes were burning bright yellow, just like mine. Tilted its head, slow and deliberate. Then it spoke, my own voice echoing back at me. We told you not to come back up. My stomach dropped. I raised the rifle, but it didn't move. It just smiled, cracks spreading across its face like broken porcelain. You survived because you were meant to. You're part of it now. Took a step forward, then another. Every motion it made rippled the air around it like heat waves. Behind it, more shapes crawled from the smoke, each one twitching, mutating, growing extra limbs and faces where none should be. The virus hadn't died. It had evolved, reacted to radiation, merged with it. I fired a shot straight through its head. The bullet tore it apart, only for the pieces to reform seconds later. That's when I ran. Through the burning fields, through the ruins of the town, toward the southern forest where an old drainage tunnel might still lead me deeper underground. The screams behind me multiplied, echoing through the red mist. As I reached the tunnel entrance, I looked back one last time. The horizon shimmered like glass. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of glowing eyes stared from the trees, watching me. And through the static in my earpiece, a voice whispered again. Containment failed. It's spreading. Then the transmission ended with a single tone, long, sharp, and final. I climbed down into the dark, sealed the tunnel, and whispered to myself, maybe this time I'll stay underground. But even as I said it, I could feel something burning beneath my skin, a warmth that wasn't there before. And I realized, maybe I didn't escape it at all. The room smelled of burnt copper and recycled air. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as the last remaining staff crowded around a dimly lit operations table. The digital map of the southeast United States glowed faintly red. Florida was nothing but static interference. Major Corbin adjusted his headset and cleared his throat. Satellite feeds dead. Last visual shows total surface collapse across southern Florida. Radiation patterns aren't decaying like expected. Dr. Alara Miles, the chief virologist, didn't look up from her console. Because it's not just radiation, it's feeding on it. General Harker turned from the screen, his uniform stiff but his face gaunt from sleepless nights. You're saying the virus survived a nuclear strike? Alara looked up, eyes hollow. No, General. I'm saying it adapted. Strain 0B metabolizes energy, heat, radiation, even carbon compounds. The nukes gave it fuel. A heavy silence fell across the room. On the far wall, the emergency broadcast system logo pulsed faintly. They hadn't transmitted in days. The outside world didn't even know if there was a government left to send alerts anymore. Then a sharp beep cut through the silence. A communications officer spun around. Sir, receiving an encrypted signal on the GhostNet frequency. Harker's expression hardened. That network's dead. We burned it 3 years ago. Signal's real, sir. Tracing origin point is southern Florida. Underground. Corbin frowned. That can't be right. There's nothing alive down there. The tech turned pale. You'll want to hear this, sir. He patched the signal through. The speakers hissed, then crackled with distortion. Through the static, a voice whispered, low, ragged, but unmistakably human. Echo base. This is Elias Reigns. Do not engage containment teams. The virus is conscious. It's learning. The entire room went silent. Harker's cigar froze halfway to his lips. Reigns is dead. Confirmed casualty during the first sweep. Alara's eyes widened. No, that's his voice. I trained him during the bioweapon trials. Corbin muttered, Jesus, if he's alive down there, you don't understand. Elias's voice cut in again. It's using our frequencies. It knows who we are. Every transmission, every code, every move we make. It's listening. The feed crackled, distorted. Faint screams echoed in the background, metal tearing. Then, they're coming. Don't. The transmission cut. Corbin slammed the table. Trace it. Get me that location. The screen blinked, showing a faint pulse from deep within Florida's irradiated ruins. Alara whispered, if he's right, the virus isn't spreading by air or blood. It's spreading through data. Meaning? The general asked. She turned slowly, voice trembling. Meaning every time we listen to him, every time we open that channel, we might already be infected. All at once, the screens in the command room flickered. The EAS logo warped into red static. Letters began forming across every monitor. Typed one by one like invisible fingers were at the keyboard. We hear you. We learn. We evolve. Then the lights went out. Somewhere deep in the bunker, the intercom crackled with a voice that sounded eerily like Elias. Only this time, it wasn't asking for help. Containment failed. We are the new broadcast. I woke to the sound of static. At first, I thought it was just the echo of memory. One of those phantom sounds that come after weeks of listening to broken radios and screams. But it was real. The transmitter beside me was lighting up, even though I hadn't powered it on. The display was cracked, the buttons half melted, yet the signal was strong. Pulsed like a heartbeat. Signal acquired. Source, Northcom, Command Black Echo. My heart sank. That meant the government was still alive. At least parts of it. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt cold. Elias Reigns, a distorted voice said through the speaker. You shouldn't be transmitting. You compromised the network. I froze. That wasn't my superior. That wasn't anyone I knew. It was my own voice. Every word it said, I could feel it in my chest, like my lungs were echoing the transmission. I backed away, grabbed my rifle, and aimed it at the radio. Who are you? The voice chuckled. Static burst across the signal, jagged and broken. We are you. The screen on the radio began to bleed red light, bright enough to illuminate the bunker walls. The air grew hotter, the generator coughing from overload. You survived because we allowed it. You carried us here. I slammed the butt of the rifle into the transmitter. Sparks flew. The light dimmed, but the voice didn't stop. Now it was coming from everywhere. Through the metal pipes, the vents, the walls themselves. You thought you were immune, soldier. You thought you left the infection behind. But you were the first carrier. My hands shook. My breath came fast and ragged. No, I whispered. That's not possible. I was in containment. I was clean. We are beyond clean, beyond disease. We are information now. Then came the smell, iron and rot like fresh blood. I turned toward the corner of the room where the water was leaking through the concrete. Except it wasn't water. It was red, thick, pulsing, crawled across the floor toward me like veins under glass. I backed against the door, loaded a fresh mag, and fired. The bullets hit the wall, and the red liquid reacted. It splattered upward, coating the ceiling, forming faces. Hundreds of them, twisting, screaming, talking. You can't kill data, Elias. You are the message. I ran. through the tunnel, past the rusted ladder, into the maintenance corridors that stretched for miles. My light flickered, cutting through clouds of steam and ash. The deeper I went, the louder the whispers grew. They weren't just in my head anymore, they were inside the comms network. The government had tried to burn it, bury it, wipe it out. But by doing so, they'd given it power, energy to feed on, signals to travel through. And now it was using me as a bridge. I reached a steel blast door at the end of the tunnel, sealed tight, labeled GOV, Biocontainment Node 07. The keypad was still active. I hesitated. My hand hovered over it. If I went in, I might find answers. If I stayed out, I might live a little longer. The radio on my chest clicked on one last time. My voice, my real voice,